Suburb of Dearborn, Michigan, nestled in the heart of a close-knit Muslim community, the Hassan family was seen as a symbol of stability and success. The residents knew Tariq Hassan as a dedicated man, devoted to his career as an engineer and fiercely committed to his wife Samira and their two young children. Their lives appeared idyllic, a model of traditional values in a modern world. But appearances can be deceiving. When Tariq was found brutally murdered in his own garage, the crime sent shockwaves through the community. The investigation revealed an unsettling truth. Beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life, the Hassan family harbored a secret that would shatter everything they knew. At the center of the storm was Samira Hassan, a 29-year-old wife and mother who had been living a double life. Her affair with her brother-in-law, Zaid, exposed a web of lies and betrayal that no one could have anticipated. And when the dust finally settled, the devastating truth left the community wondering, who was really responsible for Tariq's death? I'm really happy you could join us. As we get started, please remember to like this video to support our work and share with me, where is your home country? From the outside, everything about the Hassan family seemed picture perfect. Tariq Hassan, 35, had worked hard to build a comfortable life for his family. He had moved to Dearborn from Cairo over a decade ago, following a career opportunity that allowed him to establish himself as an engineer in the auto industry. With a well-paying job and a supportive community of fellow Muslim immigrants, Tariq was able to create a secure and stable home for his wife and children. Samira, 29, had married Tariq when she was just 20, in a union arranged by their families. At the time, she had been optimistic, believing in the stability and respect that her new life with Tariq would bring. For years, their marriage seemed solid, at least from the outside. Samira had devoted herself to her children and household, taking care of everything while Tariq spent long hours at work. Their children were still young, ages 5 and 7, and Samira's days were... Tariq's commitment to his work had grown over the years, and with each new project, he spent more and more time away from home. The emotional distance between them became more apparent as Tariq's focus shifted entirely toward his career. Samira had tried to be understanding, telling herself that he was working hard for their family's future, but the long, lonely days were beginning to take their toll. She missed the intimacy they once shared, the late-night conversations, the laughter, the sense of connection. Now their interactions were limited to logistical discussions about the children, bills, and schedules. When Samira felt invisible, the emotional void left by Tariq's absence was growing, and Samira found herself longing for something more. She wanted to feel desired again, to experience the passion that had long since disappeared from her marriage. But she never imagined that this yearning would lead her down a path that would ultimately destroy everything she had built. Enter Zaid Hassan, Tariq's younger brother. At 31, Zaid was everything Tariq was not, free-spirited, charming, and unpredictable. While Tariq had chosen a stable, traditional career path, Zaid had taken a different route. He worked as a freelance photographer, spending his time. Zaid and Tariq had always had a complex relationship. Tariq, ever the responsible elder sibling, had often been the one to help Zaid out of sticky situations when his unconventional lifestyle got him into trouble. Still, despite their differences, they remained close, at least on the surface. Zaid's frequent visits to the Hassan household became a regular occurrence. He was the fun uncle to Tariq and Samira's children, and his playful nature made him a favorite in the family. Samira and Zaid quickly formed a bond over shared interests: art, literature, and music. Where Tariq was distant and detached, Zaid was attentive and engaging. What began as harmless conversation quickly evolved into something deeper. Late at night, after the children had gone to bed and Tariq was working late in his office, Zaid and Samira would sit in the living room, talking for hours. They laughed about childhood memories, shared stories about their hopes and dreams, and found themselves growing closer with each passing day. Samira found in Zaid the connection she had been missing with Tariq. He listened to her, understood her frustrations, and made her feel seen in a way that her husband no longer did. The attraction between them grew steadily, an unspoken tension that neither dared to acknowledge, until one night it could no longer be ignored. With the children. After the kids were tucked into bed, Samira and Zaid sat together on the couch, watching a movie. But neither of them was paying attention to the screen. The energy between them was palpable, the air thick with unspoken desire. Samira felt her pulse quicken as Zaid's arm brushed against hers. It was a simple touch, but it sent a surge of electricity through her body. She glanced at him, her heart racing. Zaid met her gaze, his eyes filled with a mixture of longing and hesitation. They had danced around this moment for weeks, and now it was staring them in the face. Without saying a word, Zaid reached out and gently took Samira's hand. The room seemed to shrink around them, the noise of the outside world fading away in a soft, tentative kiss. The kiss was like a spark igniting a fire that had been smoldering for far too long. In that moment, all of Samira's doubts, fears, and guilt melted away, replaced by a rush of passion that she hadn't felt in years. She kissed him back, and the world fell away. That night marked the beginning of their affair. In the days and weeks that followed, Samira and Zaid's relationship deepened. They met whenever they could, sneaking moments alone while Tariq was at work or out of town. The secrecy of their affair only heightened the intensity of their connection. Every secret meeting, the weight of their deceit grew heavier. Samira knew that what she was doing was wrong. She knew that she was betraying not only her husband, but her faith and her family. But she couldn't bring herself to stop. Zaid filled a void in her life that had been growing for years, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. Yet despite the passion and excitement, Samira was constantly on edge. Every time she saw Zaid, she feared they would be discovered. Every time she looked at Tariq, the guilt gnawed at her, deleting text messages, avoiding phone calls when Tariq was around. But as the affair continued, it became harder to hide. And what Samira didn't know was that Tariq was beginning to suspect that something was terribly wrong. Though Tariq's focus was primarily on his career, he wasn't entirely blind to the changes in his wife's behavior. He noticed that Samira had become more distant over the past several months. She was more guarded with her phone, often leaving the room to take calls or quickly locking her screen when he entered. She was also more distracted during their rare moments of family time, her attention seemingly elsewhere, of managing the household and caring for the children while he was busy with work. But as the weeks went by, the small, seemingly inconsequential details began to add up. Samira had started dressing differently, more carefully, more intentionally. She seemed more focused on her appearance, something that hadn't been a priority for her in years. Tariq's growing suspicions gnawed at him. He had always trusted Samira implicitly, but now he found himself questioning her every move. He began paying closer attention to her, watching for any signs that could confirm his fears. He noticed the way her phone buzzed, more flashing across her face. One evening, while Samira was in the shower, Tariq's curiosity got the better of him. Her phone lay on the nightstand, the screen lighting up with a notification. Hesitant at first, Tariq picked up the phone, feeling a surge of guilt for invading her privacy. But as he unlocked the screen, what he found confirmed his worst fears. There, in plain sight, was a message from Zaid. The words were innocuous on the surface, but the context was unmistakable. It was a message of affection, filled with subtle innuendo and references to their secret meetings. As Tariq scrolled through the conversation, the full extent of the affair became painfully clear. His wife, the woman he had loved and trusted for years, was having an affair with his own brother. Tariq's heart pounded in his chest, upended, and the rage that surged through him was unlike anything he had ever felt before. The realization that his wife and his brother had betrayed him in the most intimate way was unbearable. He felt a deep, burning need for retribution, but Tariq was not a man prone to impulsive actions. He was methodical, calculating. He knew he had to confront them, but he needed time to process the enormity of what he had just discovered. In the days that followed, Tariq simmered with quiet rage, carefully planning how he would expose their betrayal and exact his revenge. Let's pause for a moment to reflect. What do you think about the case we're exploring today? Share your insights in the comments below, and thank you for joining us. A week later, Tariq could no longer keep his anger in check. Admitted was too much for him to bear. He waited until late one night after the children were asleep to confront Samira. The argument was explosive. Tariq's voice was filled with venom as he accused her of the affair, demanding that she tell him the truth. Samira, caught off guard by the confrontation, tried to deny it at first. But when Tariq showed her the messages on her phone, there was no longer any point in lying. Samira broke down in tears, confessing to the affair and begging for Tariq's forgiveness. She tried to explain how lonely she had been, how neglected she had felt, and how Zaid had filled a void in her life. But her words only seemed to fuel Tariq's rage. He accused her of destroying their family. Argument escalated, with Tariq threatening to expose the affair to their families and to the community. He told Samira that she had ruined his life and that she would pay for what she had done. Samira, terrified of what Tariq might do, pleaded with him to keep the affair a secret, to think of the children and the damage it would do to their lives if the truth came out. But Tariq was beyond reason. His anger was too great, his sense of betrayal too deep. The confrontation ended with Tariq storming out of the house, leaving Samira in tears, unsure of what would happen next. The night of the murder was unsettlingly quiet. Samira had tried to calm herself after the explosive argument with Tariq, but the tension in the air was thick and unrelenting. She went to bed with her mind racing, unsure of what her husband's next move would be. It didn't come easily. Every sound in the house made her jump. Every creak of the floorboards filled her with dread. At some point, exhaustion overtook her, and she drifted into a restless sleep, unaware that downstairs, in the garage, her husband was meeting a brutal fate. It wasn't until the early morning that Samira woke, her heart pounding for reasons she couldn't explain. The house was eerily silent. She got up and walked through the hallway, her feet cold on the wooden floors. A strange sense of foreboding crept over her as she descended the stairs. Something wasn't right. As she entered the garage, the sight before her was unimaginable. Tariq's lifeless body lay crumpled on the floor, a pool of blood spreading out beneath him. His head had been savagely beaten, pierced the early morning silence, her mind struggling to comprehend the horror before her. In a state of shock, she called 911, her voice barely coherent as she tried to explain what had happened. The operator's calm, professional tone was in stark contrast to the panic surging through her. All she could do was repeat, "He's dead. My husband is dead," over and over again. Within minutes, the police arrived at the scene. Detective Amanda Price, a seasoned investigator with years of experience in homicide cases, took one look at the scene and knew this was no random attack. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing appeared to have been stolen. The brutality of the murder suggested something deeply personal, a crime of passion, fueled by anger and betrayal. As the paramedics confirmed Tariq's death and began examining genuine, but Price had seen enough cases to know that first impressions were rarely the whole story. In the hours following the discovery of Tariq's body, Samira was taken to the police station for questioning. Her shock and grief were palpable, but as Detective Price probed deeper into the couple's relationship, cracks began to show in Samira's story. Samira told the detectives that she had gone to bed early the night before, exhausted from the emotional argument with Tariq. She claimed she had no idea who could have wanted to harm him. But as Price questioned her about the state of their marriage, Samira's answers became vague and inconsistent. The affair with Zaid came to light almost immediately. Samira confessed to it reluctantly, knowing that there was no way to hide the truth any longer. She explained how she had felt neglected by Tariq, how Zaid had been a source of comfort and connection, but she swore that the affair had nothing to do with Tariq's murder. Despite her tearful denials, Detective Price wasn't convinced. The timing was too coincidental, and Samira's behavior during the questioning raised several red flags. It all before the guilt of a spouse involved in a murder, trying to cover their tracks. But there was one problem. Samira had no obvious motive to kill Tariq. Yes, she had been unfaithful, and yes, their marriage was strained, but there was no financial incentive or history of violence that would suggest she had planned his murder. The detectives couldn't help but wonder if someone else had been involved. As the investigation continued, the focus shifted to Zaid Hassan, Tariq's younger brother and Samira's lover. His disappearance only fueled the detectives' suspicions. They theorized that Zaid, driven by jealousy or fear of being exposed, had killed Tariq in a fit of rage and fled the scene. Detective Price and her team began tracing Zaid's movements in the days leading up to the murder. Witnesses confirmed that Zaid had been seen arguing with Tariq just days before his death, a confrontation that had turned heated. The argument had taken place outside a local cafe, and while no one had heard the specifics, it was clear that tensions between the two brothers had reached a breaking point. The detectives also uncovered text messages between Zaid and Samira, exchanged on the night of the murder. In the messages, Zaid expressed his frustration had to change, that their relationship couldn't continue like this. It was a cryptic message, but one that the detectives interpreted as a potential motive for murder. But despite their efforts, Zaid remained elusive. His phone was turned off, and his apartment appeared abandoned. His friends and colleagues hadn't seen or heard from him since the night Tariq was killed. As days turned into weeks, Zaid became the prime suspect in the investigation, and the police launched a full-scale manhunt to track him down. Just as the investigation seemed to be reaching a dead end, a new lead emerged. A neighbor came forward with information that would change the course of 10 p.m., several hours before Tariq's estimated time of death. The description matched Zaid, but the timeline didn't make sense. According to the forensic team, Tariq had been killed sometime between midnight and 2 a.m. If Zaid had left the house at 10 p.m., he couldn't have been there when the murder occurred. This new piece of information threw the investigation into turmoil. If Zaid hadn't killed Tariq, then who had? The detectives were forced to reconsider their theories. Had someone else entered the house after Zaid left? Had Samira been involved in a more direct way than they initially thought? Or was there a third party involved, someone they hadn't even considered? The investigation took a new direction as the detectives began than Zaid. As the investigation continued, a shocking new lead emerged, one that none of the detectives had anticipated. Surveillance footage from a gas station near the Hassan home showed a familiar figure meeting with Samira just hours before the murder. The man was Ibrahim Mansour, a close family friend and someone who had been a constant presence in the Hassan household for years. Ibrahim had always been close to Tariq and Samira, but what no one knew was that he had been secretly harboring feelings for Samira for years. His friendship with the family had given him access to their lives, and over time, his affection for Samira had grown into an unhealthy obsession. He had watched from the sidelines as Samira and Tariq's marriage crumbled, believing that one day she would turn to him. When Ibrahim discovered the affair between Samira and Zaid, his obsession turned to rage. In his mind, Tariq was the one keeping him from being with Samira, betrayed by both brothers, and he saw Tariq's murder as the only way to remove the obstacle standing between him and the woman he loved. Confronted with the evidence, Ibrahim confessed to the murder. His story was chilling. On the night of the murder, he had confronted Tariq in the garage, telling him that he knew about the affair. The argument quickly turned violent, and in a fit of rage, Ibrahim grabbed a wrench and bludgeoned Tariq to death. But Ibrahim's confession didn't end there. He revealed that he had planned the murder for weeks, carefully orchestrating it to look like Zaid was the killer. He knew that Zaid's disappearance after the argument with Tariq would make him the prime suspect, and he hoped that with Tariq and Zaid out of the way, fantasy. Samira had never reciprocated his feelings, and his obsession had driven him to commit an unspeakable act of violence. Ibrahim was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. His confession brought the investigation to a close, but the damage had already been done. The Hassan family, once so close, had been torn apart by betrayal, jealousy, and murder. Zaid, who had been hiding in a neighboring state, eventually returned to Dearborn. He was cleared of all charges, but his life was in ruins. The affair with Samira had destroyed his relationship with his family, and he cut ties with her completely. Unable to face the shame of what had happened, Zaid disappeared from the community, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and broken relationships. Involved in Tariq's murder, her affair with Zaid had set the events in motion. She was ostracized by her community, abandoned by her family, and left to pick up the pieces of a life that had been destroyed by her choices. In the end, she moved away from Dearborn, hoping to start over. But the weight of the past followed her wherever she went. The story of the Hassan family was one of betrayal, jealousy, and tragedy. Samira's affair with Zaid had set off a chain of events that led to the brutal murder of her husband. But in the end, it was Ibrahim's unrequited love that sealed Tariq's fate. The case left a scar on the community, a reminder of the dangers of hidden desires and the devastating consequences they can bring. In the end, no one emerged unscathed. The Hassan family, once so